warm summer breeze drifted through the open window of Olivia Mitchell's bedroom, rustling the pages of her open journal. At 17, Olivia had grown accustomed to the quiet life she shared with her mother in their modest suburban home in Lakeside, Connecticut. Ever since her father had left them 5 years ago, it had been just the two of them, finding their rhythm, healing together, and building a life that felt comfortable, if not always exciting. But everything changed. 3 months ago, when Richard Blackwood walked into their lives. "Olivia, come downstairs, honey. Richard's here and dinner's almost ready." Her mother's voice, high-pitched with excitement, echoed up the stairwell. Olivia sighed, closing her journal and tucking it under her pillow. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, hazel eyes that her mother always said were identical to her father's, brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and an expression that betrayed her unease. She forced a smile, practicing for the performance ahead. "Coming, Mum," she called back, her voice deliberately cheerful. She descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The house smelled of her mother's famous lasagna, a dish she only prepared for special occasions. These days, Richard's visits were apparently always special occasions. In the dining room, her mother, Eleanor Mitchell, was arranging flowers in a vase, another new habit since Richard had entered the picture. Eleanor looked younger somehow, her blonde hair freshly colored and styled, her face glowing with happiness. "There she is," Richard's voice boomed from the kitchen doorway. He emerged holding a bottle of expensive wine, his 6'2" frame dominating the room. He was handsome in that polished, almost artificial way. Perfect teeth, salon-styled brown hair with distinguished touches of silver at the temples, and clothes that looked straight out of a magazine. The brilliant student. How was the debate? Team meeting today? Olivia's smile tightened. "Fine, thanks." She didn't bother correcting him that today had been the literary magazine, not debate team. He never seemed to remember the details of her life, despite his outward display of interest. "Your mother tells me you're working on a piece about environmental policy. I'd love to read it sometime. I have some connections in that sector, Yuku." "No?" He winked at her mother, who beamed with pride. "It's actually a short story," Olivia muttered, sliding into her chair at the table. "Oh, of course, a short story." Richard laughed as though he'd known all along. "I always get those things mixed up. Your mother talks about you so much it's hard to keep everything straight." Eleanor touched his arm affectionately. "Richard just donated a substantial amount to the Connecticut Environmental Protection Fund. Isn't that wonderful, Liv?" "Very generous," Olivia replied, noting how her mother had started calling her Liv, only after Richard had done so first. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "It's nothing, really. When you've been as fortunate in business as I have, it's important to give back." Dinner progressed as it always did when Richard was over, her mother hanging on his every word, Richard dominating the conversation with stories about his international business trips, his investment successes, and the influential people he knew. Tonight he was explaining how he'd advised a tech startup that had recently gone public, netting him millions. The CEO wanted to take the company in an entirely different direction, Richard explained, gesturing with his wine glass. "I told him, Jason, you're making a fundamental mistake. The market isn't ready for that approach." 6 months later, he called to thank me, said I'd saved his company. Eleanor sighed dreamily. "You have such incredible business instincts." "Richard?" Olivia pushed her lasagna around her plate, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. Every story positioned Richard as the hero, the wise advisor, the successful visionary. Yet something about him felt off, like a puzzle with a piece that didn't quite fit. As if sensing her skepticism, Richard turned his attention to her. "Olivia, your mother tells me you're starting to think about colleges. Have you considered Yale? I'm an alumnus, you know. I could make a call." "I'm actually more interested in Northwestern," Olivia replied. "Their journalism program is excellent." "Journalism?" Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a tough field these days with print media struggling. Have you considered business or law? Much more stable career paths." Before Olivia could respond, her mother chimed in. "Richard's just looking out for your future, honey. Isn't it wonderful to have someone with his experience to guide us?" Us. The word hung in the air. When had her mother started thinking of them as a unit with Richard. Actually, Richard said, setting down his fork and looking at Eleanor with an intensity that made Olivia's stomach clench, I wanted to discuss something with both of you tonight. Eleanor's eyes widened with anticipation, and Olivia felt a cold dread spreading through her chest. Eleanor, Olivia, he began, reaching into his jacket pocket. These past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. I never expected to find such joy again after losing my wife 10 years ago. Olivia watched as her mother's eyes filled with tears. Richard had mentioned his deceased wife before, always in vague terms that somehow never included details about how she had passed away. I know this might seem fast to some people, Richard continued, pulling out a small velvet box. But when you know, he opened the box to reveal a diamond ring that sparkled ostentatiously under the dining room light. Eleanor Mitchell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Her mother gasped, hands flying to her mouth. Richard, I don't know what to say. Say yes, he urged, his voice soft but somehow commanding. Yes, Eleanor exclaimed, tears now streaming freely down her face. Yes, of course, yes. Richard slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to embrace her. Over her mother's shoulder, his eyes met Olivia's, and she felt a chill run down her spine. There was something calculating in his gaze, something that didn't match the loving words he was whispering in her mother's ear. Isn't this wonderful, Liv? Her mother turned to her, face radiant with happiness. We're going to be a family again. Olivia forced herself to smile. Congratulations, Mom. I'm happy for you. And there's more, Richard announced, keeping an arm around Eleanor's waist. I want us to live together as a family right away. My house in Westport has plenty of room for all of us. A beautiful view of the Sound, and it's in one of the best school districts in the state for Olivia's senior year. Eleanor's eyes widened. You want us to move in with you? But this house... We can keep it, of course, Richard said smoothly. Perhaps rent it out for additional income, but I want to take care of you both, give you the life you deserve. No more worrying about bills or mortgage payments. Olivia felt as if the room was spinning. Everything was moving too fast. 3 months of dating, and suddenly they were supposed to leave the only home she'd known since her parents' divorce, the home where she'd processed her father's departure, where every corner held memories of the life they'd rebuilt. Olivia, you'll have your own suite, Richard added, turning to her with that perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. Your mother showed me pictures of your room here, and I've already started working with a designer to create something similar, but bigger and better. You'll love it. The thought of Richard examining pictures of her private space, planning to recreate it in his mansion, made her skin crawl. When would we move? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I was thinking this weekend, Richard replied, casually, as if suggesting a trip to the movies. I have movers on standby. They're the best in the business. They'll pack everything, transport it, and unpack it all. You won't have to lift a finger. Her mother squeezed Richard's hand. That's so generous, Richard, but it seems so sudden. Liv and I would need time to sort through our things, decide what to bring. Nonsense, Richard interrupted gently. Bring everything. Whatever doesn't fit or you don't need anymore, we can donate. I want you both to feel completely at home. Conversation continued around Olivia, but she barely heard the words. Her mother and Richard were planning their new life together, discussing wedding dates and honeymoon destinations, while she sat frozen, unable to process the rapid changes. Later that night, after Richard had left with a promise to return the ayur next day with paperwork for the move, Olivia confronted her mother in the kitchen. Mom, don't you think this is all happening too fast? She asked, helping to load the dishwasher. You've only known him for 3 months. Eleanor sighed dreamily, admiring her ring under the kitchen light. When it's right, honey. I know it seems sudden, but at my age, you don't want to waste time when you find someone special. But we don't really know him, Olivia persisted. Where's his house in Westport exactly? What happened to his first wife? How did he make all his money? Don't these questions matter? Her mother's expression hardened slightly. Richard is a private person about certain things, and I respect that. He's been nothing but generous and loving to both of us. I thought you'd be happy for me, Liv." "I want to be," Olivia said softly. "I just have a weird feeling about him. Something doesn't seem right." Eleanor placed the last plate in the dishwasher with a clatter. "That's enough. Olivia, I understand this is a big change, but I need your support, not your suspicion. Richard Blackwood is a wonderful man who wants to give us a better life. Is that so hard to accept?" Looking at her mother's flushed face and defensive posture, Olivia realized she wouldn't get through to her tonight. "I'm sorry, Mom. I just want you to be happy." "He makes me happy," Eleanor said firmly. "Happier than I've been in years. Please try to get to know him better." "For me?" Olivia nodded reluctantly, but as she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, the uneasy feeling persisted. She couldn't explain it, but something about Richard Blackwood set off alarm bells in her mind. His too perfect smile, the way his stories never quite added up, how he'd swept into their lives and within 3 months was changing everything. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Olivia made a decision. If they were going to move in with Richard Blackwood, she needed to find out who he really was. Her mother might be blinded by his charm and wealth, but Olivia would uncover the truth, whatever it might be. The Blackwood mansion stood at the end of a winding private drive, sheltered from view by ancient oak trees and meticulously manicured hedges. As the moving truck pulled through the ornate iron gates, Olivia gazed out the car window, taking in the sprawling estate with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The house itself was an imposing 3-story colonial with white columns and expansive windows that gleamed in the morning sunlight. "It's even more beautiful than the pictures." Eleanor gasped from the front passenger seat, reaching over to squeeze Richard's arm as he drove. "Wait until you see the inside," Richard replied, his voice warm with pride. "I had the staff prepare everything for your arrival. I want today to be perfect." Staff. The word echoed in Olivia's mind. The word echoed in the whirlwind of the past 4 days, Richard's proposal, their hasty packing, the endless discussions about the move. She hadn't considered that living in a mansion would mean having strangers in their daily lives. Richard parked the car in front of the house, where a middle-aged woman in a simple black dress stood waiting on the steps. "That's Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper," Richard explained as they exited the car. "She's been with me for years, practically runs the place." Mrs. Reynolds smiled, politely as they approached, but Olivia noticed her eyes seemed to evaluate them carefully. "Welcome to Blackwood House, Mrs. Mitchell, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Blackwood has told us so much about you both." "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds," Eleanor replied, clearly flustered by the formal reception. "And please call me Eleanor." "As you wish," the housekeeper nodded, though something in her tone suggested she would continue using the formal address, regardless. "I've prepared the East Wing for you and Miss Mitchell as Mr. Blackwood instructed. The movers have been directed to bring your belongings there." Richard placed his hand on the small of Eleanor's back, guiding her toward the entrance. "Let me show you around your new home." The interior of the mansion was just as impressive as its exterior. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, antique furniture that looked too valuable to actually use. As Richard led them through the main floor, pointing out the formal dining room, the library and the conservatory, Olivia felt increasingly out of place. This wasn't a home, it was a museum. "And this," Richard announced, opening a set of double doors, "is my study. Normally I conduct all my business in here, but I'll be traveling less now that I have you two lovely ladies to come home to." The study was masculine and imposing. Leather furniture, dark wood paneling, and a massive desk, positioned in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. "It's lovely," Eleanor murmured, though Olivia could see her mother was overwhelmed. "This is a private space," Richard continued, his tone shifting slightly. "I keep important business documents here, so I'd appreciate if you both respected that this room is off-limits unless I'm present. Security reasons, you understand." Olivia noted the change in his demeanor, the warmth momentarily replaced by something cooler, more controlling. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "Of course," Eleanor quickly agreed, "we wouldn't dream of disturbing your workspace." After showing them several more rooms on the main floor, Richard finally led them upstairs to the east wing. "Eleanor, this will be our suite," he said, opening a door to reveal a luxurious bedroom with an adjoining sitting room and massive bathroom. "I had it redecorated based on your favorite colors." Eleanor gasped at the soft blues and creams, the elegant furnishings, and the balcony overlooking the gardens. "Richard, it's absolutely beautiful." "And Olivia," Richard continued, leading them further down the hallway, "this is your suite." He opened another door to reveal a space that made Olivia freeze in the doorway. The room was indeed a larger, more luxurious version of her bedroom, at home, but the resemblance was unsettling. The same color scheme, similar furniture arranged in nearly identical positions, even art prints that matched the posters she'd had on her walls, except these were framed, expensive versions. "I had my designer recreate your room with some upgrades, of course," Richard explained, watching her reaction carefully. "What do you think?" Olivia struggled to find her voice. "It's very accurate. There's a private bathroom through that door," he continued, pointing, "and that door connects to a study space I thought you might like for schoolwork." "Thank you," Olivia managed, fighting the creeping sensation that Richard had been studying her life far more closely than she'd realized. "I'll let you both get settled in," Richard said, checking his watch. "I have a few calls to make. Mrs. Reynolds will help with anything you need, and dinner will be at 7 in the main dining room." After he left, Eleanor spun around the room, touching the expensive furnishings with reverent fingers. "Isn't this incredible, Liv? It's like a dream." "It's definitely something," Olivia replied, opening the closet door to find it was a walk-in the size of her old bathroom. "But don't you think it's weird that he recreated my room so exactly? He must have been taking notes or pictures without us realizing." Eleanor's smile dimmed slightly. "He was being thoughtful, trying to make you comfortable in a new place. Try to see the good in this situation, please." Olivia bit back a more pointed response. Her mother was happy, happier than she'd seen her in years, and she didn't want to ruin that. But the feeling that something was off about Richard Blackwood had only intensified since his proposal. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine in the mansion. Eleanor spent her time redecorating the few spaces Richard had given her free rein over, excitedly planning their upcoming wedding and getting to know the staff. Olivia, meanwhile, began her own quiet investigation. First, she attempted to research Richard online, using her laptop in the privacy of her new bedroom. To her surprise, there was very little information available about him. For someone who claimed to be a successful businessman with international connections, his digital footprint was suspiciously small. She found mentions of a Richard Blackwood who had donated to various charities in Connecticut over the past few years, but no business websites, no LinkedIn profile, no social media presence. On the third night in the mansion, Olivia decided to venture downstairs after everyone had gone. To bed, the house was eerily quiet as she padded barefoot through the dimly lit hallways, making her way toward Richard's study. She knew it was off-limits, but it was also the most likely place to find information about who Richard really was. The study. Door was locked as she'd expected. She was about to turn away when she heard footsteps approaching. Heart pounding, she ducked behind a large potted plant in the hallway, holding her breath as Richard himself appeared, dressed in a robe and carrying a glass of what looked like whiskey. He unlocked the study door and entered, leaving it slightly ajar behind him. Olivia waited, counting to 100 in her head before creeping closer. Through the crack in the door, she could see Richard seated at his desk, speaking in low tones on a phone she hadn't seen before. Not the sleek smartphone he usually carried, but an older model. "The plan is proceeding perfectly," she heard him say, his voice different somehow, harder, colder than the warm tone he used with her mother. "The woman is completely under my control. No, there won't be any problems with the transfer. I've already started the paperwork. Just one complication, the daughter. She's suspicious. No, I can't handle her. She's just a teenager. Yes, it will all be complete before the wedding." Olivia's blood ran cold. What transfer was he talking about? What would be complete before the wedding? Suddenly, Richard stood and moved toward the door. Olivia retreated quickly, nearly tripping in her haste to get away. She rounded the corner just as the study door opened fully, then raced on tiptoes back to the staircase. Once safely in her room, door locked behind her, Olivia sat on her bed with her heart hammering against her ribs. She had been right all along. Richard was hiding something that involved her mother and apparently a significant amount of money. But what could she do? She had no proof, just a snippet of a suspicious conversation. The next morning at breakfast, Richard was his usual charming self, asking about their plans for the day and suggesting that Eleanor meet with the wedding planner he'd hired. "Olivia, I understand you'll be starting at Westport Academy in the fall," he said, sipping his coffee. "I took the liberty of arranging a tour for you next week. It's an excellent school. Many graduates go on to the Ivy League." "That's very thoughtful," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the knot of fear in her stomach. "Mom mentioned that you went to Yale. What did you study there?" A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Richard's face before his smile returned. "Business and economics primarily, though I spent a fair amount of time enjoying the social aspects of college as well," he chuckled, turning to Eleanor. "I wasn't always the serious businessman you see before you." "When did you start your investment firm?" Olivia pressed, ignoring her mother's warning glance. "After a few years in corporate finance," Richard answered smoothly. "I realized I could make more of an impact on my own. But enough about my boring career path. Tell me more about your interest in journalism, Olivia." The deft way he redirected the conversation confirmed Olivia's suspicions. Richard was adept at talking about himself while revealing almost nothing of substance. Later that day, while her mother was meeting with the wedding planner and Richard was allegedly at his office in the city, Olivia decided to explore the mansion more thoroughly. She started with the West Wing, which Richard had briefly shown them but described as mostly guest rooms. The wing was quiet and had a slightly neglected air, despite being immaculately clean. As she passed one closed door, Olivia noticed it was slightly ajar. Glancing around to ensure no staff were nearby, she pushed it open and slipped inside. The room appeared to be a storage space of sorts, filled with boxes and various items that seemed out of place in the otherwise perfectly appointed mansion. Curiosity piqued. Olivia began examining the contents. Most boxes contained what appeared to be normal household items, photo frames, books, decorative objects. But one trunk in the corner, partially hidden under a cloth, caught her attention. She pulled back the covering to reveal an ornate wooden chest with intricate carvings. It was locked, but the key was surprisingly in the keyhole, as if someone had been interrupted while accessing it. Olivia turned the key and lifted the lid. Inside, she found stacks of documents, financial records, property deeds, and what appeared to be multiple passports. With trembling hands, she picked up the top passport and opened it. Richard's photo stared back at her, but the name printed beside it wasn't Richard Blackwood. It was Daniel Morrison. Olivia quickly flipped through the other passports. Each contained Richard's photo with a different name: James Sullivan, Thomas Reynolds, Michael Clark. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. Richard Blackwood, or whatever his real name was, had been living under multiple identities. Beneath the passports were newspaper clippings, most of them yellowed with age. As Olivia scanned the headlines, a sickening pattern emerged. Wealthy widow's fortune disappears. Businessman vanishes after wife reports missing funds. Suspected conman targets affluent divorcees. The faces in the grainy photos were harder to identify with certainty, but several bore a striking resemblance to a younger version of the man her mother was planning to marry. Different names appeared in the articles, but the scheme was always similar. A charming, wealthy businessman who wooed vulnerable women, married them, gained control of their assets, and then disappeared. With shaking hands, Olivia used her phone to quickly photograph as many documents as she could. She had just returned everything to its place and closed the trunk when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Frantically looking around for a hiding place, she ducked behind a large armoire just as the door opened. Through a narrow gap, she could see Mrs. Reynolds enter, carrying a feather duster. The housekeeper moved methodically around the room, dusting various surfaces. When she reached the trunk, she paused, adjusting the cloth covering it with what seemed like particular care. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in her movements that suggested she knew exactly what the trunk contained. After Mrs. Reynolds finally left, Olivia waited several minutes before slipping out of the room and hurrying back to her suite. Locking the door behind her, she sat at her desk and began examining the photos she'd taken. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard Blackwood was a fraud, a con man who had targeted her mother for her modest but stable assets, including her house and the inheritance she'd received after her own mother's passing the previous year. Olivia's hands trembled as she considered her next move. She had to show these documents to her mother, had to make her understand the danger before it was too late. But would Eleanor believe her? Or would Richard's charm and her mother's desperate desire for happiness blind her to the truth? A soft knock at her door made Olivia jump. She quickly closed the photo gallery on her phone before calling, "Who is it?" "It's Mrs. Reynolds, Miss Mitchell," came the reply. "May I have a word?" Olivia hesitated, wondering if the housekeeper had somehow discovered her snooping, but curiosity won out. She opened the door to find Mrs. Reynolds standing rigidly in the hallway, her expression grave. "May I come in, Miss Mitchell? What I have to say shouldn't be overheard." Olivia stepped back, allowing Mrs. Reynolds to enter. The housekeeper closed the door quietly behind her, then turned to face Olivia with an intensity that confirmed her suspicions. This was not about clean towels or dinner preferences. "Miss Mitchell," Mrs. Reynolds began, her voice barely above. A whisper, "I saw you in the storage room earlier." Olivia's stomach dropped. "I was just exploring—" Mrs. Reynolds held up a hand. "Please, we don't have much time. Mr. Blackwood will be returning from the city in an hour, and we must speak. Before then," she glanced nervously at the door, "I know what you found in that trunk. I know who he really is." Olivia stared at the woman, trying to gauge if this was some kind of trap. "You know he's not Richard Blackwood." The housekeeper nodded grimly. "I've worked for him for 3 years. In that time, he's used 2 different names. When I first joined the household, he was James Sullivan. Then, about 18 months ago, he became Richard Blackwood. New identification, new background story, but the same man." "Why are you telling me this?" Olivia asked, still wary. "Aren't you loyal to him?" A shadow crossed Mrs. Reynolds' face. "I was hired legitimately, through an agency. By the time I realized what kind of man he was, I was already compromised." She hesitated. "He keeps information on everyone who works for him. Information that could ruin lives if revealed. That's how he ensures loyalty." Olivia's mind raced. "He's done this before, hasn't he? Targeted women like my mother?" Mrs. Reynolds moved to the window, checking the driveway before responding. "Your mother is the 3rd since I've been here. The others—" "What happened to them?" Olivia asked, her voice tight with fear. The housekeeper turned back, her expression haunted. "They disappeared. After the weddings, after he had secured their assets, they simply left. He told the staff they had reconciled with family abroad, or decided to travel the world, but their possessions remained in storage, like the items you found today." Olivia felt sick. She pulled out her phone, showing Mrs. Reynolds the photos she'd taken. "These articles, they suggest that he's been doing this for years, long before you worked for him." Mrs. Reynolds nodded. "I believe so. He's methodical, patient. He studies his targets carefully, learning their desires, their weaknesses. Then, he becomes exactly what they need." She looked directly at Olivia. "Your mother's loneliness, her struggle as a single parent, her financial concerns, he's positioned himself as the solution to all of these." "I have to warn her," Olivia said, moving toward the door, but Mrs. Reynolds caught her arm. "Not yet," the housekeeper insisted. "You need more than suspicions and old newspaper clippings. Your mother is deeply under his spell. If you confront her now with only partial evidence, he'll convince her you're jealous, troubled, imagining things. He's very good at manipulation." Olivia knew Mrs. Reynolds was right. Her mother was already defensive about Richard, brushing off Olivia's concerns as teenage resistance to change. She needed irrefutable proof. "What should I do?" she asked. Mrs. Reynolds glanced at her watch. "For now, act normal. Don't give him any reason to suspect you know something. Meanwhile, I'll try to help you gather more concrete evidence." She pulled a small notepad from her pocket, scribbled something and handed it to Olivia. "This is my personal number. Text only, never call. If you need to meet, suggest it's about household matters." Olivia tucked the paper into her jeans pocket. "Why are you helping me? You're risking a lot." The housekeeper's expression softened slightly. "The last woman, Caroline, was her real name. She had a daughter too. Younger than you, only 12. After they disappeared, I overheard him on the phone, discussing how the girl had been taken care of. I've regretted my silence ever since." She straightened her uniform. "I should go, remember, text only." After Mrs. Reynolds left, Olivia sat on her bed, mind whirling with the new information. If what the housekeeper said was true, her mother wasn't just being conned, she was in serious danger. They both were. For the rest of the day, Olivia forced herself to act normally, joining her mother and Richard for dinner, listening to wedding plans with feigned interest, and even managing to laugh at Richard's carefully crafted anecdotes. All the while, she observed him with new awareness, noting how he subtly controlled every conversation, how his charm concealed a calculating coldness in his eyes. Later that evening, as Olivia prepared for bed, her mother knocked on her door, entering with an excited smile. "Liv, honey, I wanted to show you what arrived today," Eleanor said, holding up a large envelope. "The preliminary paperwork for Richard to adopt you after the wedding. Isn't that wonderful? He wants you to legally be his daughter." Olivia's blood ran cold. "Adopt me? Mom, I'm 17. I'll be 18 in 8 months. Why would he need to adopt me?" Eleanor's smile faltered slightly. "It's symbolic, honey. Richard wants to make us officially a family. He's even adding both our names to his accounts and properties. He's so generous. Or he's ensuring legal access to everything you own," Olivia thought grimly. Aloud, she said, "That's a big step, Mom. Maybe we should talk to a lawyer of our own before signing anything." "Richard has already taken care of all the legal aspects," Eleanor replied, her tone growing defensive. "His attorney has prepared everything." "But don't you think we should have our own attorney review the documents?" Olivia persisted. "Someone who represents our interests?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "Our interests? Richard is about to become my husband and your stepfather. Our interests are aligned, Olivia. I wish you could see that he only wants what's best for us." Recognizing the familiar signs of her mother digging in her heels, Olivia backed down. "You're right, Mom. I'm sorry. It's just a lot of change all at once." Eleanor's face softened. "I know, sweetheart, but this is a good change. Richard is giving us a wonderful new life." She hugged Olivia tightly. "Just give him a chance, please, for me." After her mother left, Olivia pulled out her phone and sent a text to the number Mrs. Reynolds had given her. "Need to talk. Important info about adoption papers." The response came almost immediately. "Garden shed, 6 a.m. tomorrow. Security cameras. Don't cover that area." Olivia barely slept that night, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios. At 5:45 a.m., she slipped out of her room, creeping silently through the quiet house and out a side door that Mrs. Reynolds had left unlocked. The garden shed stood at the edge of the vast property, partially hidden by a row of tall hedges. As Olivia approached, Mrs. Reynolds emerged from the shadows, beckoning her inside. The shed was surprisingly spacious and immaculately organized, with gardening tools hanging on walls and bags of soil and fertilizer stacked neatly in corners. Mrs. Reynolds closed the door and turned on a small battery-powered lantern. "Adoption papers?" the housekeeper asked without preamble. Olivia nodded, explaining what her mother had told her the previous evening. Mrs. Reynolds' expression grew grave. "This is his pattern. He legally adopts any children before the wedding, giving him control over trust funds, inheritance rights, and guardianship. It's how he accesses all family assets." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. "So he's after my mother's house and her inheritance, and your trust fund from your grandmother if you have one," Mrs. Reynolds confirmed, "plus any life insurance policies in your names. He's thorough." "But my mom isn't wealthy," Olivia protested. "We live comfortably, but nothing like—" She gestured vaguely, indicating the mansion and grounds. "To him, it's not about the amount," Mrs. Reynolds explained. "It's about the conquest. He targets women who are financially stable but emotionally vulnerable. Your mother's modest assets are still worth taking, and his lifestyle, this house, the cars, the staff, it all costs money. Money he doesn't actually have." "What do you mean?" Mrs. Reynolds sighed. "This mansion is mortgaged to the hilt. The cars are leased. Half the staff hasn't been paid in 2 months. He projects wealth to attract his targets, but it's mostly smoke and mirrors." Olivia's mind raced. "I need to find concrete proof, something my mother can't ignore." "There might be a way," Mrs. Reynolds said slowly. "His study, the place he keeps off limits. There's a hidden safe behind the painting of the sailing ship. I've seen him access it when he thought no one was around. That's where he keeps the most damning evidence. Documents on his past identities, financial records, details of previous victims." "But the study is always locked," Olivia pointed out. "He keeps a spare key in his nightstand," Mrs. Reynolds replied. "I've never dared to take it, but if you could get access to your mother's suite—" Olivia shook her head. "Too risky. If he caught me in there or discovered the key missing—" "There is one other possibility," Mrs. Reynolds said hesitantly. "Every third Thursday of the month, he meets with his financial advisor in the city. He's unusually consistent about this, leaves at precisely 9 a.m., returns no earlier than 2 p.m. During that time, I could create a distraction for the rest of the staff while you access his study." "When is the next third Thursday?" Olivia asked. "Tomorrow." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "That soon?" Mrs. Reynolds nodded. "If we're going to find evidence before your mother signs those adoption papers, it has to be tomorrow." The sound of distant voices made them both freeze. Mrs. Reynolds peeked through a small window. "It's just the gardeners arriving. We should head back separately." She handed Olivia a small USB drive. "If you find anything electronic, copy it to this. Documents. Take photos. Be quick and leave everything exactly as you found it." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Reynolds placed a hand on Olivia's arm. "Be careful, Miss Mitchell. If he suspects you know anything—" "I will," Olivia promised. "And thank you." The day passed in a blur of anxiety as Olivia tried to act normal, while mentally preparing for the next morning. At dinner, Richard announced he would be in the city the following day for business meetings. "Anything exciting?" Eleanor asked, refilling his wineglass. "Just the usual quarterly review with my financial team," Richard replied casually. "Rather dull, I'm afraid. I should be back by late afternoon." Olivia focused on her plate, afraid her face might betray her knowledge of his predictable schedule. "Well, the caterer is coming tomorrow to discuss the wedding menu," Eleanor said. "I wish you could be here for that." Richard smiled, taking her hand across the table. "I trust your judgment completely. My dear, whatever you choose will be perfect." The practiced sincerity in his voice made Olivia's skin crawl. How had she not seen through him from the beginning? That night, Olivia scarcely slept, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. What if she found nothing in the safe? What if she was caught? What if Mrs. Reynolds was setting her up? But deep down, she knew the housekeeper was telling the truth. The pieces fit too perfectly to be a fabrication. At precisely 8:50 the next morning, Olivia watched from her bedroom window as Richard's black Mercedes pulled out of the driveway. Her mother had left earlier to meet the wedding planner in town, giving Olivia the perfect opportunity. At 9:15, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Reynolds. "Kitchen emergency. Staff occupied. Go now." Heart pounding, Olivia made her way to Richard's study. The hallway was deserted, the house unusually quiet. Using the small brass key Mrs. Reynolds had slipped her at breakfast, she unlocked the study door and slipped inside. The room was immaculate, smelling of expensive leather and subtle cologne. Olivia moved directly to the painting Mrs. Reynolds had mentioned, a large seascape of a sailing ship battling stormy seas. She carefully lifted it from the wall, revealing a modern electronic safe. Her heart sank. She hadn't anticipated a digital lock. What now? Desperately, she tried the most obvious combination, Richard's birthday as he had shared it with them. No success. Next, she tried the date he claimed to have met her mother. Again, nothing. Then, inspiration struck. She tried the date of their upcoming wedding. The safe clicked open. Inside were several folders, a stack of passports and various financial documents. Working quickly, Olivia photographed everything, not taking the time to examine the contents in detail. She downloaded files from the laptop that sat on the desk, which surprisingly had no password protection, perhaps because Richard believed no one would ever access his private study. As she was about to close the safe, a small velvet jewelry box caught her attention. Curiosity getting the better of her, she opened it, expecting to find some expensive gift for her mother. Instead, she found a diamond ring identical to the one Richard had given her mother, except for a small inscription. Inside, "To Caroline, forever yours." Caroline, the name of his previous target, according to Mrs. Reynolds, the woman who had mysteriously disappeared. Just then, Olivia heard footsteps in the hallway. She quickly replaced everything, closed the safe, and hung the painting back, in its exact position. She had just ducked behind the large leather sofa when the study door opened. To her horror, Richard himself walked in. He hadn't gone to the city after all. Olivia held her breath, pressing herself into the narrow space between the sofa and the wall. Richard moved to his desk, seemingly unaware of her presence, and picked up the phone. "It's me," he said to whoever was on the other end. "Everything is proceeding as planned. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and I've already started the process of transferring their assets. The house is in escrow, and once the adoption papers are signed, I'll have access to the girls' trust fund as well." Olivia's phone suddenly vibrated in her pocket, a text message. She frantically tried to silence it, but it was too late. The buzzing seemed deafening in the quiet room. Richard stopped mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," he said, then loudly demanded, "Who's there? Show yourself." Immediately. Olivia's mind raced. There was no way to escape undetected. Instead of hiding further, she decided to brazen it out. She stood up from behind the couch. "Hi, Richard," she said, forcing a casual tone. "I was looking for Mom. I thought she might be in here with you." Richard's face was a mask of controlled fury. "This room is off limits, Olivia. I've made that very clear." She shrugged, affecting teenage nonchalance while her heart hammered. "Sorry, the door was open. I just needed to ask Mom about my doctor's appointment this afternoon." "Your mother is in town," Richard said coldly, moving toward her. "And I distinctly remember locking this door before I left." Olivia backed toward the exit. "It was open when I tried it. Maybe you forgot this time." Richard's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly were you doing hiding behind my sofa?" "I heard you coming and panicked," she admitted, deciding a partial truth was her best defense. "I knew you'd be upset about me being in here, and I didn't want to get in trouble." He studied her face intently. "What were you looking for, Olivia?" "Nothing. I told you I was looking for Mom." Richard took another step toward her. His charm completely vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "I don't believe you." Olivia's back hit the door. "I should go find Mom in town. I'll tell her. You came back early." "Give me your phone," Richard demanded suddenly. "What? Why?" "Your phone, Olivia, now." Her mind raced. The photos of the safe contents, the text messages with Mrs. Reynolds, everything was on her phone. I left it in my room." "The device that just buzzed in your pocket?" Richard's voice was dangerously soft. "Don't lie to me, Olivia. It only makes things worse." Olivia knew she had to get out of that room. "Fine, here," she said, pulling out her phone and holding it out. As Richard reached for it, she deliberately dropped it, then used the moment of distraction to open the door and bolt into the hallway. "Olivia!" Richard bellowed behind her. "Come back here immediately." She ran toward the main staircase, Mindy, racing. She needed to get out of the house to reach her mother somehow. As she rounded the corner, she nearly collided with Mrs. Reynolds. "He's back early," Olivia gasped. He caught me in the study. I have to get out of here. The housekeeper's face paled. The southeast exit, through the kitchen. I'll delay him. Go, now. Olivia sprinted through the house, hearing Richard's voice echoing through the hallways as he searched for her. She burst through the kitchen, past startled staff members and out the service entrance. The gardener's utility vehicle sat nearby, keys in the ignition. Without hesitation, Olivia jumped in, started the engine, and sped down the service drive, toward the main gate. In her rearview mirror, she could see Richard emerging from the house, his face contorted with rage. But it was too late. She was already passing through the gates, turning onto the main road that led to town, to her mother, and to safety. Or so she hoped. Olivia's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she navigated the winding roads toward downtown Westport. Her mind raced even faster than the utility vehicle, processing everything she had discovered. Richard, or whatever his real name was, had been planning to steal her mother's assets all along. The adoption papers, the joint accounts, the rushed wedding. It was all part of an elaborate scheme he had executed multiple times before. She needed to find her mother, show her the evidence, and convince her to leave before Richard caught up with them. According to her mother's schedule, she should be meeting with the wedding planner at the Willow Cafe on Main Street. Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard. She rejected it immediately, only for it to ring again seconds later. After the third rejection, text messages began flooding in. Olivia, you're making a serious mistake. Come back to the house so we can talk about this calmly. Your mother will be very upset by your behavior. I'm only trying to protect our family. The last message made her blood boil. There was no our family, only a predator and his intended victims. Main Street came into view, and Olivia quickly parked the utility vehicle in the public lot. She sprinted the 2 blocks to the Willow Cafe, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Through the cafe's large front window, she spotted her mother sitting with a stylish woman who was showing her what appeared to be fabric swatches. Olivia burst through the door, startling several patrons. "Mom, we need to leave, now!" Eleanor looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to embarrassment to concern. "Olivia, what on earth?" "Please, Mom," Olivia pleaded, aware of the scene she was creating but too desperate to care. "We need to go somewhere private. It's about Richard. I can prove he's not who he says he is." The wedding planner raised her perfectly shaped eyebrows, clearly intrigued by the drama unfolding before her. Eleanor's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Olivia Mitchell, you're making a spectacle. Sit down this instant or wait for me in the car." "Mom, you don't understand." "Now, Olivia." Recognizing the futility of creating a bigger scene, Olivia reluctantly slid into the chair next to her mother. "Fine, but as soon as you're done, we need to talk. It's serious." Eleanor offered an apologetic smile to the wedding planner. "Teenagers," she said with a forced laugh. "Let's continue with the menu options, shall we?" The next 20 minutes were excruciating for Olivia. She sat in tense silence, watching her mother discuss flower arrangements and cake flavors as if their lives weren't in danger. Every few minutes, she checked the cafe entrance, expecting Richard to appear at any moment. Finally, the wedding. Planner gathered her materials. "I think we've made excellent progress today, Eleanor. I'll email you the updated plans this evening." As soon as the woman left, Eleanor turned to Olivia, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. "What is going on with you? You show up here breathless and causing a scene. You're wearing gardening clothes for some reason, and you've clearly upset Richard. He's called me 3 times in the past half hour." "You spoke to him?" Olivia asked, alarmed. "I texted him that I was in a meeting and would call back later," Eleanor replied. "Now explain yourself." Olivia glanced around the crowded cafe. "Not here. Can we go to the library? It's quiet and it's only a block away." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, but this better be important." Once seated in a secluded corner of the Westport Public Library, Olivia pulled out her phone and began showing her mother the evidence she had gathered. Photos of the multiple passports, financial documents showing transfers from previous victims, newspaper clippings about missing women, and the identical engagement ring inscribed with another woman's name. He's a con artist, Mum, Olivia explained in a hushed voice. He targets women like you, divorced or widowed, financially stable, emotionally vulnerable. He marries them, gains control of their assets through legal documents like the ones he's having us sign, and then he disappears with everything. Eleanor's face had grown increasingly pale as she swiped through the damning evidence. This can't be right. There must be some explanation. Mrs. Reynolds confirmed it, Olivia pressed. She's worked for him through 2 identity changes. The previous woman he targeted, Caroline, she disappeared after the wedding along with her young daughter. Mrs. Reynolds overheard him talking about how they'd been taken care of. Eleanor's hands trembled as she handed the phone back to Olivia. I need to think. It's too much to process. Mom, we don't have time to process. He knows I was in his study. He knows I saw everything. He's looking for us right now. His study? Eleanor's eyes widened. Olivia, you broke into his private office after he specifically asked us to respect his privacy. Olivia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Mum, are you seriously worried? It's about his privacy right now. The man is a fraud. He's planning to steal everything we have. Lower your voice, Eleanor hissed, glancing around the library. You don't know that for certain. These photos, they could be taken out of context. And breaking into his study, going through his personal belongings. That's not right, Olivia. What's not right is him lying about who he is and targeting vulnerable women. Olivia could feel her frustration mounting. Why couldn't her mother see what was right in front of her? Eleanor took a deep breath. I need to hear his side of this. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation. A reasonable explanation for having multiple passports with different names, for having newspaper articles about missing women, for having an identical engagement ring with another woman's name engraved in it. Olivia's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Mom, please, we need to go to the police. The police? Eleanor looked horrified. Olivia, that's extreme. We're not going to the police based on some photos and the word of a housekeeper we barely know. I need to talk to Richard first. Olivia felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. If you call him, he'll know where we are. He'll come here. Good, Eleanor said firmly. Then we can get this misunderstanding cleared up. It's not a misunderstanding, Olivia was nearly shouting now, earning a stern look from the librarian. At the front desk, she lowered her voice. Mom, I'm begging you. Let's just go somewhere else to talk about this, a hotel maybe, just for tonight. If I'm wrong about everything, we can go back tomorrow and apologize. Eleanor studied her daughter's face, and for a moment, Olivia thought she might agree. Then her mother's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Richard's name appeared on the screen. I'm going to answer this, Eleanor said decisively. He deserves a chance to explain. Mom, please don't. But Eleanor had already accepted the call, stepping away from the table for privacy. Olivia watched in dismay as her mother spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing back at her with expressions ranging from confusion to disappointment. After what seemed like an eternity, Eleanor returned to the table. Richard explained everything, she said, her voice unnaturally controlled. The passports were props from a charity fundraiser where they did a spy-themed event. The newspaper clippings are research for a book he's helping a friend write. And the ring, her voice faltered slightly. It was meant for his first wife before she became ill. He kept it all these years and had my name inscribed over the original engraving because he wanted me to have the ring he'd designed with so much love. Olivia stared at her mother in disbelief. And you believe that? Those ridiculous explanations. They're not ridiculous, Olivia. They make perfect sense. Richard has always been a generous man, involved in numerous charities. He's mentioned his writer friend several times, and reusing the ring, it's romantic, not suspicious. Mom, he's lying to you. Can't you see that? Eleanor's expression hardened. What I see is my daughter breaking into a private room after being explicitly told not to, stealing property, and making wild accusations against the man I love. Richard is understandably hurt, but he's willing to forgive you if you apologize. Apologize? Olivia couldn't believe what she was hearing. I'm trying to protect you. Richard is on his way here, Eleanor continued as if Olivia hadn't spoken. He wants to clear this up face to face, as a family. Panic surged through Olivia. He's coming here now. Yes, and I expect you to listen to him with an open mind. Eleanor reached across the table to take Olivia's hand. Honey, I understand that all these changes have been difficult for you. Leaving our home, adjusting to a new life, sharing me with someone else. It's a lot. But inventing conspiracies isn't the answer. Olivia pulled her hand away. I'm not inventing anything. Everything I showed you is real. Real but misinterpreted, Eleanor insisted. Richard explained it all. Of course he did. He's had years of practice coming up with excuses and explanations. That's what con artists do, Mom. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, then stood. He's here in the parking lot. Let's go talk to him. Olivia remained seated, her mind racing. If Richard got her alone, who knew what he might do? He wouldn't risk exposure, not when he was so close to securing their assets. I'm not going out there. Olivia, don't be childish. We're going to resolve this as a family. He's not family, Olivia hissed. He's a predator who's targeted you for your money. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, visibly struggling to maintain her composure. Either you come with me willingly to speak with Richard, or I'll tell him to come in here. Your choice. Trapped and seeing no alternative, Olivia reluctantly got to her feet. Fine, but we stay in public where people can see us. He suggested we talk in his car where we'll have privacy. Absolutely not, Olivia said firmly. The cafe across the street, or nowhere. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor nodded. Fine, the cafe. They walked in tense silence to the Morning Brew Cafe opposite the library. Richard was waiting outside, his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, his expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. Eleanor, Olivia, he greeted them, moving to embrace Eleanor with a show of relief. I've been so worried. Olivia stepped back to avoid his touch, maintaining a safe distance as they entered the cafe. Richard guided them to a table in the back corner, partially secluded but still within view of other patrons. A small comfort, Olivia thought. I believe we have some things to discuss, Richard began once they were seated, his voice gentle, yet somehow authoritative. Olivia has made some concerning accusations. I found proof of who you really are, Olivia replied, refusing to be intimidated. Multiple identities, financial schemes, missing women. You're a fraud. Richard's expression remained sympathetic, which only increased Olivia's frustration. He turned to Eleanor. I've explained the context behind what Olivia found, but I understand why without that context, she might have jumped to troubling conclusions. She showed me everything, Eleanor said, her voice wavering slightly. The passports, the articles, the ring. Ah, yes, the ring. Richard's face adopted a pained expression. I should have been honest with you from the beginning, Eleanor. I was planning to tell you after the wedding. The ring was indeed originally designed for Caroline, my first wife. First wife? Eleanor repeated. You told me your wife's name was Sophia. A flicker of something, annoyance, alarm, crossed Richard's face before his smooth mask returned. Sophia Caroline. I always called her Caroline, though her legal name was Sophia. A habit I should have mentioned. Olivia pounced on the inconsistency. You're lying again, just like you lied about who you are, about your business, about everything. Richard's eyes hardened momentarily before he composed himself. Olivia, I understand you're protective of your mother. It's admirable. But these accusations are not just hurtful. They're potentially damaging to my reputation. I'm trying to be patient because I know change is difficult at your age, but there are limits to what I can tolerate. Limits to what you can tolerate, Olivia repeated incredulously. What about the limits to what your victims tolerated before they disappeared? What happened to them, Richard, or James, or whatever your real name is? Olivia, Eleanor exclaimed, that's enough. Richard placed a calming hand on Eleanor's arm. It's all right, darling, she's upset and confused. He turned back to Olivia. I've never used another name, Olivia. I've been Richard Blackwood my entire life. The passports you found were indeed props from a charity event. I chair the Westport Foundation, which hosts an annual spy-themed gala. The props are quite realistic. And the newspaper articles about missing women who were involved with men matching your description, Olivia challenged. Research, as I explained to your mother. My friend Bradley Kent is a crime novelist. I've been helping him with background material for his next book. And the financial documents showing transfers from women who then disappeared. Richard sighed patiently. Investment records for clients of my firm. The women didn't disappear, they relocated after our investment strategies paid off handsomely for them. I keep records of particularly successful client outcomes. Olivia could see her mother wavering, wanting to believe Richard's explanations. Mom, please. He has an answer for everything because he's practiced this. Mrs. Reynolds confirmed it. She's worked for him through multiple identity changes. Ah, Mrs. Reynolds, Richard said, his tone shifting slightly. I was wondering when she might become involved. I'm afraid Judith Reynolds has some personal issues that have affected her perception of reality. I've kept her on staff out of compassion, but perhaps that was a mistake. What are you talking about? Olivia demanded. Richard looked sympathetically at Eleanor. Mrs. Reynolds lost her daughter several years ago to an unfortunate accident. Since then, she's developed certain fixations. She becomes irrationally attached to young women who remind her of her daughter, creating elaborate fantasies about saving them from imagined dangers. It's happened twice before with visitors. To the house. You're lying, Olivia insisted, though a seed of doubt had been planted. Mrs. Reynolds had seemed so sincere, but what did Olivia really know about her? I have documentation from her previous psychiatric evaluations, Richard continued smoothly. I've kept her condition private out of respect, but I can show you the reports if necessary. Eleanor looked stricken. That poor woman. I had no idea. Few people do. I prefer to respect her privacy. Richard turned to Olivia. I understand why you believed her, Olivia. She's very convincing when in the grip of her delusions. Olivia felt the ground shifting beneath her. Richard had an explanation for everything, each more plausible than the last. Even the inconsistencies in his stories could be dismissed as simple misunderstandings or Olivia's own bias against him. There's something else, she said, grasping at one last piece of evidence. I heard you on the phone in your study. You said the plan was proceeding perfectly, that Mom was completely under your control, and that you were handling the complication of me. Richard's expression didn't falter. You must have overheard my call with Bradley about the plot of his novel. We were discussing character motivations, how the villain would think and speak. I often help him work through dialogue issues. Eleanor looked relieved. See, Olivia, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. You can't seriously believe all this, Olivia exclaimed, desperation creeping into her voice. Enough, Olivia, Eleanor said firmly. Richard has answered every accusation with transparency and patience. I think you owe him an apology. Olivia felt cornered, her evidence systematically dismantled by Richard's smooth explanations. She looked from her mother's expectant face to Richard's practiced expression of patient understanding and knew she was losing the battle. Just as she was about to speak, though whether to apologize or continue fighting she wasn't sure, the cafe door opened and Mrs. Reynolds walked in. The housekeeper spotted them immediately, her face pale but determined as she approached their table. Mrs. Reynolds, Eleanor said, clearly surprised. What are you doing here? I came to support Olivia, Mrs. Reynolds replied, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her posture. And to tell you the truth about Mr. Blackwood. Richard's composure slipped momentarily, his eyes flashing with genuine anger before he recovered. Judith, this isn't the place for your issues. Perhaps we should get you home, where you can take your medication. Mrs. Reynolds didn't even look at him. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not mentally ill. That's just another of his lies. I've worked for this man for 3 years, during which time I've watched him change identities and target vulnerable women. Your daughter is telling the truth. Eleanor's face reflected her confusion. Richard says you've had some difficulties since losing your daughter. I never had a daughter, Mrs. Reynolds interrupted. That's another fabrication. What I do have is this. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder. Documentation I've been collecting for years. proof of his real identity and his previous victims. Richard stood abruptly. "This has gone far enough. Judith, you're fired. Eleanor, Olivia, we're leaving now." "No, Richard," Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I want to see what Mrs. Reynolds has." The change in Eleanor's tone made Richard pause. Olivia watched as calculations ran behind his eyes. They were in a public place. Creating a scene would draw unwanted attention. "Fine," he said coldly, sitting back down. "Let's see this proof." Mrs. Reynolds opened the folder and spread out its contents on the table. There were photographs of Richard with different women, copies of marriage certificates under various names, bank statements showing large transfers, and most damning of all, a letter from a woman named Melissa Sanders, describing how a man matching Richard's description had married her mother, gained control of her assets, and then disappeared, leaving them destitute. "I've been in contact with several of his previous victims," Mrs. Reynolds explained. "Some lost everything but escaped. Others weren't so fortunate." Eleanor's hands trembled as she examined the evidence. I don't understand. This can't be—" "It's all fabricated," Richard insisted, though his confident demeanor had begun to crack. "Judith has clearly gone to extraordinary lengths to create this fictional narrative." "Is it fictional?" Mrs. Reynolds challenged, pulling out her phone. "Perhaps you'd like to explain that to Angela Williams, whose mother married you when you were using the name Thomas Reynolds." She placed the phone on the table, showing a video call connecting. A woman in her 30s appeared on the screen, her expression hardening when she saw Richard. "That's him," Angela said without preamble. "That's the man who married my mother, drained her accounts and left her with nothing but debt. We had to move in with my grandparents after he disappeared." Richard stood again, his charm evaporating completely. "This is absurd. I won't sit here and be ambushed by strangers making outlandish claims." But Eleanor wasn't looking at Richard anymore. She was staring at the documents spread before her, reality finally breaking through her desperate need to believe in the fairy tale Richard had created. "The house sale," she whispered. "You insisted on handling all the paperwork yourself. You said it was just being held in escrow until after the wedding, but—" She looked up at Richard, tears welling in her eyes. "You were transferring it to yourself, weren't you?" Richard's expression turned cold. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. I was protecting our assets for our future together." "Our assets?" Eleanor's voice rose. "My house, my inheritance from my mother, Olivia's trust fund from her grandmother. Those aren't our assets, Richard. They're ours. Mine and Olivia's." People at nearby tables had begun to watch the unfolding drama with interest. Richard, ever conscious of appearances, lowered his voice to a menacing whisper. "You don't want to do this, Eleanor. You have no idea what you're giving up." "I think I do," Eleanor replied, her voice gaining strength. "I'm giving up a lie, a beautiful, seductive lie that I wanted desperately to believe." She turned to her daughter. "Olivia, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." Olivia reached for her mother's hand, overwhelming relief washing over her. "It's okay, Mom. I understand why you wanted to believe him." Richard's face contorted with rage, his perfect mask finally slipping completely. "You stupid, ungrateful—" He caught himself, aware of the watching eyes, and forced a cold smile. "Fine. Keep your pathetic little house and your insignificant savings. There are plenty of other lonely, desperate women out there." As he turned to leave, Mrs. Reynolds stepped deliberately into his path. "Not anymore, there aren't. Not for you. The police have been notified. Detective Harris from the Westport PD should be arriving any moment to take our statements." On cue, the cafe door opened, and a tall woman in plain clothes entered, her badge visible on her belt. Richard glanced from the detective to the exit, clearly calculating his chances of escape. "Don't even think about it," Detective Harris said calmly. "I have officers outside and we'd be happy to add resisting arrest to the growing list of charges." As the detective approached their table, Richard's shoulders slumped in defeat. His empire of deception was crumbling around him. Eleanor stood and moved to Olivia's side, putting an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "I want you to know everything you need to arrest this man," she told the detective. "He was planning to steal everything from us." Detective Harris nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "We've been building a case against him for months, thanks to information provided by Mrs. Reynolds and several other victims who have come forward. Your testimony will help ensure he faces consequences for his actions." As Richard was led away, his wrists in handcuffs, Eleanor turned to Mrs. Reynolds. "Thank you for what you did, for helping Olivia, for gathering the evidence, for saving us." The housekeeper smiled gently. "Your daughter did most of the work. She never stopped fighting for you, even when you couldn't see the danger." Eleanor turned to Olivia, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I was so blinded by what I wanted to see that I couldn't recognize the truth." Olivia embraced her mother tightly. "It's okay, Mom. He was really good at what he did. But it's over now." As they sat together, giving their statements to Detective Harris, Olivia felt the tension of the past months finally beginning to ease. The future was uncertain. They would need to reclaim their house, unravel the financial and legal mess Richard had created, rebuild their lives. But they would do it together, stronger for having survived Richard Blackwood's web of deceit. 6. Months had passed since the day Richard Blackwood had been led away in handcuffs. The ensuing weeks had been a whirlwind of police interviews, legal proceedings, and the painstaking process of reclaiming their lives from the web of deception Richard had woven. Olivia stood in the kitchen of their reclaimed home in Lakeside, watching as her mother meticulously frosted cupcakes for the neighborhood block party later that afternoon. The familiar sight filled her with a sense of comfort that had been missing for too long. "These look amazing, Mom," Olivia said, swiping a finger through excess frosting on the edge of the bowl. "The neighbors are going to love them." Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes, something that had become increasingly common over the past few months. "I thought the lemon ones might be a nice change from my usual chocolate. Want to taste test one for me?" Olivia didn't need to be asked twice. She selected a perfectly frosted cupcake and took a generous bite. Definitely a winner. Their return to their modest suburban home had been both a relief and a challenge. After the opulence of the Blackwood mansion, the house had initially felt small, almost cramped. But with each passing day, as they reclaimed spaces with fresh paint and rearranged furniture, it had transformed back into the haven they remembered. "Have you heard back from Northwestern yet?" Eleanor asked, concentrating on piping a delicate swirl onto the next cupcake. "Not yet," Olivia replied, "but my guidance counselor says decisions should be coming any day now." "They'd be lucky to have you," Eleanor said firmly, "especially after that piece you wrote for the Lakeside Gazette. I still can't believe they published it on the front page." The article had been Olivia's first major published work, a carefully crafted piece about financial predators who target vulnerable women, written without directly naming Richard but drawing from their experience to warn others. The response had been overwhelming, with dozens of women coming forward with similar stories, some of whom had encountered Richard under various aliases. "Detective Harris called yesterday," Eleanor mentioned, moving on to the next batch of cupcakes. "She says with the additional victims who've come forward, they're looking at a much longer sentence for Richard. The prosecutor is confident." Olivia nodded, relief washing over her once more. The preliminary hearings had already revealed the extent of Richard's crimes, a decades-long spree of fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation that had left a trail of devastated families across multiple states. "Did she say anything about Mrs. Reynolds?" Olivia asked. "She's doing well. The prosecutor says her testimony has been invaluable." Eleanor paused, setting down her piping bag. "She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you'd consider visiting her sometime." Olivia hadn't seen Mrs. Reynolds since the weeks immediately following Richard's arrest, when the housekeeper had helped them navigate the complex process of separating their assets from Richard's tangled financial web. Despite her initial suspicion of the woman, Olivia had developed a deep respect for her quiet strength and determination. "I'd like that," Olivia said. "Maybe next weekend?" Eleanor nodded, then glanced at the clock. "Speaking of visits, isn't Katie coming over to study in a few minutes? Oh shoot, you're right. Olivia quickly wiped frosting from her fingers. We're working on our final English project together. I should probably clean up my room a bit. As she headed upstairs, Olivia reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. Her friendship with Katie Williams had been an unexpected but welcome development, a bright spot during the difficult transition back to Lakeside High for her senior year. Katie, whose family had moved to the neighborhood while Olivia and her mother were living at Richard's mansion, had no preconceived notions about Olivia's situation. Their friendship had begun with a shared love of journalism and had quickly deepened into something Olivia treasured. Her bedroom, though smaller than the luxurious suite at the mansion, felt genuinely hers in a way the replica Richard had created never had. The walls were now painted a soft sage green instead of the lavender she'd had since middle school, a deliberate choice to mark a fresh start. Photos of her friends, her father from happier times, and recent images of her and her mother at the beach lined her bulletin board. The doorbell rang just as Olivia finished clearing textbooks from her desk. "I'll get it," she called, bounding down the stairs. Katie stood on the porch, her curly red hair pulled into a messy bun, arms laden with books and what appeared to be a bakery box. "I brought reinforcements," Katie announced, holding up the box. "Mom's walnut brownies, brain food." "Perfect timing," Olivia laughed, ushering her friend inside. "Mom just finished baking for the block party, so we have a sugar overload situation happening." In the kitchen, Eleanor greeted Katie warmly. "Those brownies look delicious. Your mother is trying to steal my thunder for the block party, isn't she?" Katie grinned. She'd never admit it, but yes, there's definitely some friendly competition happening. She stayed up until midnight perfecting these. "Well, you girls can be the judges," Eleanor said, presenting her tray of cupcakes with a flourish. "Lemon with vanilla buttercream versus—" She peeked into Katie's box. "Oh my, those do look good." The three of them sampled both desserts, declaring a diplomatic tie before Olivia and Katie retreated upstairs to work on their project, an analytical essay comparing media coverage of financial crimes versus violent crimes, a topic Olivia had proposed based on her observations of how Richard's case had been handled by local news outlets. "So I've been thinking about our conclusion," Katie said, sprawling across Olivia's bed with her laptop. "We should emphasize how financial crimes are often portrayed as less serious, even though they can devastate just as many lives as violent crimes." Olivia nodded, spinning slowly in her desk chair. "Definitely, and maybe something about how the victims of financial crimes are often blamed. You know, they should have known better, or they were greedy and looking for a handout." Katie gave her a thoughtful look. "Is it hard, writing about this when it hits so close to home?" Olivia considered the question. Over the past months, she'd become accustomed to carefully navigating conversations about Richard and what had happened. Most people in town knew the basics, that her mother's fiancé had turned out to be a con man who was now facing multiple fraud charges, but few knew the full story. Sometimes, she admitted. "But it also feels important, you know, like I can take this awful experience and maybe help prevent it from happening to someone else." Katie nodded. "That makes sense. And you're really good at writing about it objectively, considering everything." "I've had practice," Olivia said with a wry smile. "Lots of practice with Detective Harris and the prosecutors." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the clicking of keyboard keys and the occasional rustle of paper. Olivia found herself occasionally glancing at the window, a habit she'd developed during their time at Richard's mansion when she'd constantly felt watched. She was working on breaking the habit, reminding herself that she was safe now, that Richard was in custody awaiting trial, that the danger had passed. "Hey, did you hear back from Taylor yet?" Katie asked, breaking the silence. "About prom?" Olivia felt a flush creep up her neck. "Yeah, he texted last night. He's in." "Yes," Katie pumped her fist triumphantly. "Double date prom night is officially happening. Now we just need to coordinate colors so you guys don't clash with me and Justin." The upcoming prom was another marker of how life had moved forward. 6 months ago, trapped in Richard's web of manipulation, Olivia couldn't have imagined something as normal as prom being on her radar. Now she found herself genuinely excited about dress shopping with her mother this weekend. "Mom's taking me to that boutique in New Haven on Saturday," Olivia said. "Do you want to come with us? We could look for your dress too." "Definitely." My mum will be relieved. She's been dreading the shopping trip. The afternoon passed quickly as they worked on their project, interspersed with discussions about prom, college plans, and the latest school drama. By the time Katie left for dinner, they had completed a solid draft of their essay and finalized plans for dress shopping. As Olivia helped her mother prepare dinner that evening, Eleanor seemed unusually quiet, lost in thought as she chopped vegetables for a salad. "Everything okay, Mom?" Olivia asked, setting the table. Eleanor looked up, offering a small smile. "Just thinking about how much has changed, how close we came to losing everything." Olivia set down the plates and moved to her mother's side. "But we didn't lose everything. We're okay." "Thanks to you," Eleanor said, setting down her knife to pull Olivia into a tight hug. "I still can't believe how brave you were, how persistent, when I think about what might have happened if you hadn't trusted your instincts." "Let's not think about that," Olivia suggested gently, returning the embrace. "We're here now. We're safe. That's what matters." After dinner, as they settled in the living room with cups of tea to watch their favorite crime drama, something they both found ironically therapeutic these days, Eleanor brought up a subject they had discussed several times over the past months. "I had lunch with Diane from work yesterday," she began, referencing a colleague who had recently started dating again after her divorce. She mentioned that community center course again, Rebuilding Trust After Betrayal. "The new session starts next week." Olivia glanced at her mother, noting the mixture of hesitation and hope in her expression. Eleanor had been reluctant to date again after the disaster with Richard, understandably wary of trusting her own judgment. "You thinking about signing up?" Olivia asked carefully. Eleanor nodded. "I think I might be ready, not for dating," she clarified quickly, "just for learning how to trust again in general." "I think that's a great idea, Mom." Eleanor reached over to squeeze Olivia's hand. "Would you consider coming?" With me, just for the first session." Olivia hesitated only briefly. Though she hadn't been the one romantically betrayed by Richard, his deception had affected her deeply too. The way he had studied her, recreated her room, planned to adopt her for financial gain, it had left scars that were still healing. "Sure, I'll come," she agreed. "Maybe it'll help with that piece I'm working on about rebuilding after fraud." Eleanor smiled gratefully. "My journalist daughter, always finding the story angle." "Speaking of which," Olivia said, pulling her laptop onto her knees, "I got an email from Mr. Patterson at the Gazette. He wants me to expand my article into a multi-part series about financial predators and how to protect yourself." "That's wonderful," Eleanor exclaimed. "Your first series. I'm so proud of you." Pride glowed warm in Olivia's chest. The article had been difficult to write, requiring her to revisit painful memories while maintaining journalistic objectivity, but the response had made it worthwhile. Women had reached out to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask for advice on vetting potential partners. She had even received a letter from a woman who had cancelled her wedding after recognizing warning signs from Olivia's article, signs she might otherwise have ignored. The next morning, as Olivia checked the mail before heading to school, she found a thick envelope from Northwestern University. Her heart raced as she tore it open, extracting the letter inside. "Dear Olivia Mitchell, we are pleased to offer you admission to Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism." She let out a whoop of joy that brought her mother running from the kitchen, still holding a dripping sponge. What is it?" Eleanor asked, alarmed. "I got in." Olivia waved the acceptance letter triumphantly. "Full scholarship to Northwestern." Eleanor burst into tears as she embraced her daughter, the sponge forgotten as it soaked the back of Olivia's shirt. "Oh my God, Liv, I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it." They danced around the kitchen in celebration, laughing and crying at the same time. The scholarship was the culmination of years of hard work, Olivia's excellent grades, her growing portfolio of published articles, and her powerful application essay about using journalism to expose truth and protect the vulnerable. Later that day, as Olivia walked home from school, she took a detour through the park where she had often sought solitude during the difficult months after Richard's arrest. The spring flowers were in full bloom, painting the landscape in vibrant yellows and purples. She sat on her favorite bench, overlooking the small pond where ducks glided peacefully across the surface. So much had changed in a year. Last spring, she had been a normal high school junior, living a quiet life with her mother, her biggest concerns centered around college applications and summer plans. Then Richard had entered their lives, bringing chaos disguised as opportunity, and everything had shifted. The experience had changed her in profound ways. She was more cautious now, more observant, more willing to question what seemed too good to be true. But she was also stronger, more confident in her instincts, more determined to use her voice to make a difference. As she watched a mother duck leading her ducklings across the pond, Olivia reflected on the lessons of the past year. She had learned that sometimes the most dangerous threats were the ones that came packaged in charm and promises, that sometimes loving someone meant fighting for them, even when they couldn't see the danger themselves. That strength wasn't about never being fooled, but about finding the courage to face hard truths and begin again. The sun was beginning to set as Olivia finally rose from the bench and continued her walk home. The path ahead, Northwestern, FI. Career in journalism, a life built on her own terms, stretched before her like an open road. There would be challenges, certainly, but after everything she and her mother had survived, Olivia felt ready to face whatever came next. As she reached their driveway, she saw her mother on the front porch, watering the hanging baskets of flowers they had planted together the previous weekend. Eleanor waved, her smile visible even from a distance, and Olivia waved back, quickening her pace. They had weathered the storm together, mother and daughter, and emerged not just intact, but stronger. The trust between them, tested but ultimately reinforced, was the foundation upon which they would build their future, a future free from Richard Blackwood's shadow, filled instead with the light of their own making. Eleanor set down the watering can as Olivia approached. "I was thinking we could celebrate your acceptance with dinner at Antonio's tonight. Maybe invite Katie and her parents too?" "That sounds perfect," Olivia agreed, climbing the porch steps to join her mother. As they stood together, looking out over their neighborhood bathed in the golden light of sunset, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The danger had passed, the healing had begun, and the future, bright with possibility, was theirs to shape. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Eleanor asked softly, as if reading her daughter's thoughts. Olivia slipped her arm around her mother's waist, leaning her head against Eleanor's shoulder. "Yeah, Mum, we're already okay." And in that moment, with the weight of Richard's deception finally lifting from their shoulders, Olivia knew it was true. They had reclaimed their lives, their home, their trust in each other. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for having survived the storm. The truth had set them free, just as Olivia had always believed it would. The end was really just their beginning. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been captivated by Olivia and Eleanor's journey of courage and resilience. Their story reminds us that sometimes our instincts are our best protection, and that the bonds between family can overcome even the most sophisticated deception. For more emotional stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the triumph of truth, we've prepared a special playlist of equally compelling narratives. You'll find it by clicking to your left. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that delve into life's most challenging moments and the strength it takes to overcome them. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a situation where trusting your instincts made all the difference? Join the conversation and don't miss our upcoming content. We'll be waiting for you in the comments section. Chapter